morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to AMJ Radio Live on Spaces, a weekly conversation hosted on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, at your very own at AOM Connect. Tune in to AMJ Radio Live every week on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. To do so, look out for the link posted at AOM Connect, or click on the profile picture of the host you see here when they are outlined in a bright color. That means that they are live or on air. This series has a scholar-on-scholar approach where different members of the AOM research community have the chance to speak to and learn from leading authorities in the broad field of management research. The first Wednesday of every month, we invite a special guest to give their remarks on our theme for the month. We recently had guests like Joanna Meyer speaking about Grand Challenges Research Today, as well as John Joseph speaking about decision-making research today. Look out for the link in our bio for the full list and past recordings of our many, many distinguished guests. The second Wednesday of every month, we hear a teaser of The Lit Review, an incredible podcast diving deep into a recent AMJ paper hosted by Sekou Burmese. The fourth Wednesday of every month features an actual AMJ editor. We get to find out a fun fact about this editor, their expertise, what it's been like serving as an editor at the Academy of Management Journal. And I haven't forgotten the third Wednesday of every month. The third Wednesday of every month is interactive and open to being shaped by you. Look for the form in our bio to submit your ideas for guests, to nominate yourself, to suggest formats for this weekly conversation. It's just past 11 now, so let's open up the conversation. I am Dr. Netra Pan. I'm a lecturer in entrepreneurship at Bayes Business School, formerly known as CAS.
And today I'm so glad to be joined by Dr. Christian Busch, member of faculty at USC. Dr. Christian Busch is also a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics. His research focuses on purpose-driven leadership, entrepreneurship, sustainable innovation, and serendipity. It's been featured in several top management journals, including Strategic Management Journal and Journal of Management Studies, and he's been featured in various well-known press outlets. Chris is also the best-selling author of The Serendipity Mindset. I'm so glad to have Chris here to kick off a new format we are trying at AMJ Radio Live called Reflections from the Academy. Chris, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Netra. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Chris, so my first question for you is, how long have you been coming to the Academy of Management Annual Meeting?
I think my first meeting was back in 2008, 2009. And I still remember it was quite intimidating at first, like this candy shop of interesting ideas, interesting people, and serendipity. And then the more you go, it's about, seeing great people like you and Mark and the others. And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I do remember seeing you as a PhD student, and it's really lovely to have had the chance to follow your career since then. Chris, talk to us about this last annual meeting in Boston 2023. It was the first time we were back in person. How was this academy for you?
I think what's beautiful at the moment is, we've been doing research on serendipity and related topics for quite some time. And so the past 2 years, we've really tried to cultivate a community around it and have interesting people from different fields come together. And so we had, people like Henry Mintzberg who would relate serendipity to emergence and emergent strategy, and Katie Eisenhardt relating to technology and heuristics. And so it was really about saying, how do we bring together a community that is interested in serendipity, in these kind of positive, unexpected discoveries that seem to shape, a lot of our research, but also a lot of our lives, and really kind of think about, can we build a community of practice around this? And so that was my key focus this year.
That's very meta. These annual meetings potentially enabled, cultivated serendipity and allowed you to form this community, which resulted for this year in a really great event that I also had the chance to attend called Organizational Learning, Innovation, and Growth in an Uncertain World, the Role of Serendipity. I recommend folks to check out the tweets that Christian has if they want to see the full list of incredible speakers and the highlights from the conversation of that event. So Chris, let's talk more about your research on serendipity. What is serendipity? Why is it important?
I initially started out with research on how do companies develop networks to succeed, to create social impact. And what I found fascinating is that wherever I would go. I would study entrepreneurs in Kenya. I would study CEOs of big companies in the US, things like that. And serendipity just popped up everywhere. This idea that people would make those unexpected positive discoveries that would change their life, would change their companies. And so I got really fascinated by this question. Is there a pattern behind all these different stories? Is there a science behind how these unexpected discoveries happen and what we can do about it? And so that's what I focused on. And so there's actually 3 current projects that I found fascinating around it. One is we did a systematic literature review where we tried to understand what makes serendipity. And, the 3 kind of characteristics that we found was, serendipity is very different from blind luck. Blind luck is essentially saying there's something surprising and there's some sort of value in that, but we don't really have agency. It's just something that happens to us. Serendipity is about surprise, it's about value, but there's also some agency in it. It's usually about making unexpected discoveries. It's about seeing something in the moment, connecting the dots. And so it's really about that kind of agentic piece that then also makes it relevant for management research. Second piece that I'm really excited about is we did some empirical studies, especially with Harry Barkema, around how do support organizations like incubators, how can they cultivate serendipity for their members, for their entrepreneurs? So for example, if you're an incubator, can you, rather than have a overly structured support program that puts people into particular boxes, can you develop semi-structured programs that allow people to pivot, that allow them to get a new mentor if they now change focus, and by doing that, get away from that path dependency of locking people into something particular where then they want to break out of. And so there's a lot around this, like how can we actually support others to have serendipity? And then a third stream that I'm very interested in at the moment is with Matthew Grimes, kind of exploring a little, what is the intersection of serendipity and artificial intelligence? So how can artificial intelligence help us accelerate serendipity?
So it's clear you've done a lot of work with your co-authors. You mentioned Matthew Grimes, you mentioned Harry Barkema. I have read your piece in Journal of Management Studies that you're referencing towards a theory of serendipity, a systematic review and conceptualization. So it's clear that you've done a lot of work in really clarifying this concept, theorizing it. Now I want to shift gears because I'm curious what role the Academy played in helping you shape this theoretical construct. Were these co-authors that you met at the Academy? Were these conversations that you've had with folks at the Academy?
I think it's interesting, because I remember when I started out, people were saying, hey, don't study serendipity, these kind of things. It's so hard to operationalize. It's something that, in a way, do the kind of things that are low-hanging fruits and like test things and get a lot of papers out. And I think what's happening at the moment is that if you have people like, that have worked on strategy for a long time, those people join the conversation and say, hey, look, actually serendipity is a topic that we have to study. It's something that actually is something we can more and more also capture and do something with to also get published with it. I think that's something that I find most interesting about that community, that I think it's on one hand a community that builds on the shoulder of giants, where you have the Henry Mintzbergs of the world saying, hey, the world isn't just plannable. We got to have an emergent idea of it. And then saying, hey, but can we plan for that emergence? Can we somehow bring that paradox, right, into a fruitful conversation? I think that's what this community is doing at the moment, saying there's so many different approaches to how we can understand emergent ideas and kind of bring that together with planning. And now is the time where that is more and more legitimized in terms of saying we can actually publish this in top journals. And there is enough of a community that we have enough reviewers for that actually people are de-risking it for especially young scholars who want to go into that field. And I think that's the goal, as you know, also of those kind of symposia that we're doing at the moment at the Academy and at the SMS conference, to say, let's de-risk this topic for young scholars who have seen this in their research as well, but maybe felt, I don't really have an angle for this, or I don't really have a hook for this. Let's give them something to work with.
That's really near and dear to my heart, Chris, because this is one of the reasons why we also have been experimenting with AMJ Radio Live, to allow folks who maybe weren't at the Academy, or even folks who are at the Academy and need another dose of inspiration, to bump into different ideas and consider age-old constructs, theoretical constructs from different lenses. So the PDW that you hosted at AOM this year was on organizational learning, innovation, and growth in an uncertain world, but you really introduced the idea to consider the role of serendipity, or serendipity as a lens to revisit some of these really important ideas. What other key insights emerged from this year's PDW?
Well, there's a couple of streams, and by the way, thank you. I think, thank you and Mark for also, giving people the platform to really kind of have those kind of research ideas, come out in the world. I think that's extremely important. And, this year we had, for example, Henry Mintzberg reflected a lot on how can you prepare yourself for serendipity. He had this beautiful story where he was in an elevator, and he just kind of, brought out a new book and was thinking about, hey, how could I have a textbook about this? And so in the elevator, he, met someone who said, I loved your book. And he's like, you know what, we're looking for a textbook version. And that person, potentially now ends up writing the textbook version for it. And so it's those kind of elevator moments where he then, he used those moments to say, this is not just about how companies strategize. This is also about how you as an academic at the AOM conference walk around and create your own serendipity by having that open mind, by being ready for those kind of moments, by maybe having one or two hooks that you can throw into the conversation that allow other people to connect the dots for you, like this lady did for him. And so I think it's those kind of things where Henry was focused on a lot. Katie Eisenhardt focused a lot on this idea of what's the intersection of technology and serendipity. So how do we think about that in different contexts? I think there's fascinating now, especially with AI, what we can do. And then, my favorite was Ranjay Gulati. He had this beautiful idea that, look, let's all give luck a chance. And I think that's kind of the thing where, I still remember papers that would essentially look at serendipity as like the error factor, the variance that can't really be explained, and like we try to avoid it. And this conversation was really about, no, let's bring that to the foreground and really think about, is there a way we can actually not only conceptualize and operationalize it, but also really somehow make it the focus of our research so that others can have a vocabulary for how they actually strategize. And, as a last note on this, I found that fascinating when you speak with people who actually run companies, who actually run teams. They would sometimes say things like, oh, and then I was lucky that this and lucky that this. And then when you reflect with them on it, they would say, oh, you know what? I had actually more agency in this. I was just being modest, saying that I was lucky, but actually I worked really hard to be luckier. And I think that's kind of the gist of this conversation, to say it's not either luck or effort, but it's about putting a lot of effort in to have more luck.
Wow, so rich. I wish we could spend so much more time debriefing all of those conversations from that event. I think what's really interesting in how you conceptualize Ranjay Gulati's idea of being more open to more luck. It's super interesting because our last guest on AMJ Radio Live very recently was Chris Tucci, who co-authored Crowdsourcing as a Solution to Distance Search. Just to make the links between our different AMJ Radio Live guests, there is this component of introducing noise, but the noise can be part of the luck as well, and being open to that. So in closing, I would love to ask you, what can we expect from this emerging scholarly group of researchers next year?
We really want to build on this and really dive deeper into, how do we get those papers published? How do we help the emerging community to have a conversation around this, to especially help younger scholars also to be part of that conversation? So everyone who's listening to this and who is interested in it, please do reach out. It's that kind of moment at the moment where we feel there is momentum, and we would love to welcome people from really different angles, different disciplines to, serendipity is a lot about connecting dots, especially between different areas. And so especially people who might also have felt, oh, this is something that I've seen in my research, but I didn't know how to maybe anchor it. We'd love to have a conversation about it. And looking forward to continuing this and to continuing also with you, Netra. Thank you so much for the great conversation.
Thank you so much, Chris. And this concludes our session with Chris Busch. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was a really inspiring conversation for me because I know how much the AMJ team is passionate about transformational times. We have changes in technology, AI, geopolitics, and we sometimes think the paths are defined. But speaking to you, I feel very encouraged to let myself be surprised and to try and force myself to see, what can I do with this surprise and these unexpected pieces of information to potentially look at a situation in a different way. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Goodbye.